How can Jimmy Kimmel live with him? Like, Jimmy Kimmel is a talented guy, and I don't think he's like an evil person or something, but he's made this deal where he just serves power and attacks anybody who challenges power. Like, how can, honestly, how can he look in the mirror and say, I'm doing something honorable? Like, how can he live with himself? How can his wife sleep with him?
Well, it'd be...
I mean
Yes, hypocrisy is alive and well amongst these sanctimonious leftists. From Kimmel to De Niro to Stephanopoulos, they want you to believe they're better than you, more virtuous, more decent. But we all know the truth. They lie.
What happens when Tucker Carlson and Megyn Kelly team up like the Fox News Avengers after downing triple espressos? Total annihilation, specifically of Jimmy Kimmel's ego. One moment he's cracking jokes, the next he's ducking rhetorical grenades from two pros in the art of the eyebrow raise. It's like watching a roast where Kimmel didn't realize he was the guest of honor. Or the entree. And trust us, unless your TV comes with a cringe filter, you're not ready. This meltdown is messier than a Real Housewives reunion on wine and unresolved trauma.
The cost to produce Jimmy Kimmel's show, I guarantee you, it's tens and tens of millions. It could be as much as 100 million. I have no idea. You know how much Tucker's video cost? Nothing. You know how much Jimmy Kimmel, how many people he gets tuning in on an average night? Just last week, his average was, in the overall, meaning all viewers, 1.5 million. In the key demo, 236,000. Tucker would have been embarrassed to pull that on any night he was on the Fox News channel. That's what they're getting now. Tucker's numbers were 3 times what Jimmy Kimmel gets. And Tucker's little basement video that he did from clearly like his cabin that he broadcasts out of Maine in literally has 21 million views. Okay, 21 million views. Whereas, as I point out, on ABC, a massive network that comes into your home for free, that you have to make no effort to find, at best, Jimmy Kimmel can get 1.5 million. He needs to have a little self-perspective before going out there and hurling these insults because he looks a little silly.
Caught somewhere between a smirk and a smug eye roll, Kimmel found himself steamrolled not by some keyboard warrior in a basement, but by 2 ex-Fox titans who didn't even bother to say his name. Tucker Carlson and Megyn Kelly, apparently unaware of each other's schedules, managed to tag team Kimmel's reputation with all the synchronized ferocity of sharks circling the same wounded fish. The kicker, Kimmel never even stepped into the ring.
The way of treating each other equally is joking about each other indiscriminately. So yeah, I think comedians who, and this is why so much of comedy is not funny today. It's my chief criticism of like late night comedy, which I find unwatchable. I think it's totally unwatchable. But
also contemptible. I mean, they're collaborators.
They're just like the fact checkers. They're guardians of the narrative.
First up, Tucker Carlson, Fox News' former eyebrow-in-chief and unofficial anti-establishment preacher. When he exited the network, it was like the mothership had lost its captain. Cue the tearful tributes, conspiracy theories, and enough hot takes to melt a data center. But Tucker didn't disappear, he evolved. Think libertarian podcaster meets digital flamethrower. He set up shop online, flipped on the camera, and began monologuing like a Bond villain with a grudge against mainstream fluff and late-night sanctimony.
He's not the worst. The Daily Show has the worst ratings. They only have 366,000 people watching that show. During the Jon Stewart years, it was over 2 million. Now it's down to 300,000. Seth Meyers, absolutely dreadful. He doesn't even have 1 million, 778,000. I mean, for network television, this is, you don't have to pay for it. It's there when you turn on your TV. You plug it in. That's a dreadful number. Greg Gutfeld on cable, which you do have to pay for, it has more than double the numbers of Seth Meyers. Jimmy Kimmel, 1.5 million, averaging, also equally horrible.
He never name-dropped Kimmel, but the shade was unmistakable. Tucker's biggest irritants, virtue-signaling comics, self-important media elites, and Hollywood types pretending to speak for the masses. In other words, everything Jimmy Kimmel has become. Remember when he used to mock drunk celebrities? Now he delivers moral sermons in designer suits, wagging his finger like America's disappointed dad.
A comedian and to do that, but his job is to be he's supposed to be funny, and comedians are supposed to hold people in positions of power accountable.
Suck up
Yeah,
to the people in charge.
Exactly.
He's their Praetorian guard.
Yeah,
and it's like the self-hatred he must feel because he wasn't always. That's my point. Yeah. I mean, Colbert has always been a hard partisan, talented guy, but obviously he's not a comedian. But Kimmel was a comedian. Like, how does he? I don't understand.
I don't know
how he can sleep.
He might buy into the narrative to the extent that he thinks it's morally wrong to joke about these certain topics.
But it's not just that. He's like pouring hot oil on the peasants from the parapet. Right. Like he's hurting anyone who challenges the king. Right. It's crazy.
Tucker Carlson didn't target any single late-night host directly. He didn't have to. His critiques sliced through the entire genre with surgical disdain. Its smug tone, its detachment from everyday America, and its transformation into a club for the cultural elite. Jimmy Kimmel got caught in the crossfire, not because Carlson singled him out, but because the fit was just too perfect to ignore. Carlson's resurgence wasn't driven by slick production or A-list. Guessed it was his raw alignment with a growing audience tired of being lectured by comedians who forgot how to be funny. His viral videos echoed a sentiment many felt but were too polite or too intimidated to voice: resentment toward late-night hosts who traded jokes for moral grandstanding. Kimmel, meet your reckoning.
Last night was the 96th Academy Awards show, and while you might have missed it, there was one clear winner. No, not Oppenheimer. It was sanctimonious leftists for their lead role in pretending they are better than you. Winner number one, Jimmy Kimmel. For the fourth time, Kimmel hosted the Oscars before an adoring crowd of Hollywood stars who laughed and curried favor with the man who wore blackface so many times. Yes, some of the very same celebrities who wanted you to believe they were horrified after yours truly said in 2018 that people used to don dark makeup in order to imitate well-known black celebrities, and it was
Megyn Kelly, on the other hand, didn't lob cultural grenades. She wielded a scalpel. Her attacks were precise, dissecting Hollywood's performative virtue with the cold detachment of a seasoned prosecutor. She didn't have to name Kimmel. The caricature was clear. The host-turned-preacher delivering monologues dressed up as comedy. Kelly wasn't merely annoyed, she was offended by the sanctimony. In her world, there's a reserved space for celebrities who preach morality while drowning in contradictions. Kimmel's stage, once a comedy club, had morphed into a pulpit, and from the back pew, Kelly rolled her eyes and called it out. Her audience, less angry than just exhausted, relished it. These were the folks who once tuned in for laughs but now felt ambushed by guilt trips disguised as punchlines. Kelly gave them a place to breathe, laugh, and quietly ask, "Are we the only sane ones left?"
Last 2 weeks. They had the Kennedy Center honors the other night where Joe Biden couldn't say Dionne Warwick. He kept calling her Diane, and he didn't know who Barry Gibb was. He kept calling him Billy. You know who else was honored? At the Kennedy Center. You know who else? Billy Crystal. Just FYI, do you know who once opened up the Academy Awards in full blackface?
Oh,
Billy
yeah.
Crystal. Billy Crystal. And do you know who's going to be hosting the Academy Awards this year? Jimmy Kimmel. Do you know who's worn blackface repeatedly and spoken inner city sort of urban accent saying she needs to darn those socks? Jimmy Kimmel as Oprah, as a fat-suited, black-faced darning socks Oprah.
So what happens when Tucker Carlson and Megyn Kelly, two commentators with wildly different styles, accidentally converge on the same target? Carlson, the intellectual Molotov cocktail in a blazer, flings chaos like he's hosting Jackass, Think Tank edition. Kelly, by contrast, is the calm assassin with a podcast mic, slicing through hypocrisy over Sunday brunch. Different tactics, same result. Kimmel's smug moral compass began to wobble like a Jenga tower during an earthquake. This wasn't a coordinated strike. There was no secret meeting where they decided to tag team Jimmy. It didn't require teamwork. Carlson continued his existential tirades, and Kelly kept deconstructing the echo chamber with surgeon-like accuracy. Kimmel, blissfully unaware, didn't even notice the roof was caving in until the floor gave way. That's what happens when a wrecking ball and a sniper show up at the same demolition site. You don't need a plan when the structure's already crumbling. And the tragedy. Kimmel wasn't always this. He was the fun guy, the prankster, the one who made beer chugging look like a legitimate hobby. But somewhere along the way, he swapped his class clown shtick for a robe and gavel.
The quote comedians, they were on propaganda duty too. Watch this.
He's also pushing U.S. intelligence to find evidence for this theory that the virus was accidentally released from a lab in Wuhan. That's his new angle to feed the wingnuts, to treat this virus like it was a conspiracy of some kind.
It should have never happened. This plague should never have happened. It could have been stopped. But people chose not to stop it.
What people? Tomorrow he'll blame the Spanish flu on Antonio Banderas.
Yeah. Imagine if you're a comedian and all of a sudden your cue card has all kinds of talking points from politicians and foreign governments on it. Don't read it. You degrade yourself and you become complicit in the greatest crime in history.
Suddenly, he wasn't just telling jokes, he was issuing verdicts. Like he was auditioning for both Supreme Court Justice and Prom King. The laugh track now underscored a sermon. Viewers noticed, not in a wave of outrage, but in the confusion of YouTube comments asking, what happened to this guy? That's where Carlson and Kelly came in not as competitors, but as cultural exponents. Carlson didn't have to say Kimmel's name. His rants against elitist virtue signaling had a familiar face. Kimmel became the symbol, the comic, who misplaced the punchline. Meanwhile, Kelly's critiques of celebrity hypocrisy landed like precision strikes. She wasn't using a chainsaw, but the outline of Kimmel's persona was impossible to miss. These hosts plead for compassion by day and do partisan stand-up by nighthand. Her audience saw through it like foggy glass. That the archetype happened to rhyme perfectly with Jimmy Kimmel. That was just poetic justice.
Morning show with Stephanopoulos into the evening Academy Awards broadcast with Kimmel and ABC elevating, the blackface lovin' Kimmel. They, at the same time, fired Chris Harrison, host of The Bachelor, for trying to defend one contestant on The Bachelorette for saying, gee, I know I went to this antebellum party, a couple years ago. I guess I didn't see anything wrong with it. And all he said was, are we judging her by today's standards or are we judging her by, old standards, whatever. He was basically trying to say, are we being too hard on her? Got fired. Chris Harrison has to be fired by ABC. I don't know why, because he's not a committed leftist, because he's not out there more saying all the terrible things about Republicans that Jimmy Kimmel says. So this is them saying, we get it. We're an ally, right? And I guess maybe they're trying to make up with their racist past, without ever...
This wasn't just two media figures ranting into the void. It was the sound of a broader cultural shift. Late-night television used to feel like a national living room. Jay Leno, David Letterman, even Conan, they tossed out jokes like free samples and never made you feel bad for laughing. You could watch with your dad, your grandma, or your weird libertarian roommate, and no one stormed out. The humor was sharp but welcoming. Now it's ideological dodgeball, and Jimmy Kimmel, the last kid on the playground, pretending it's still hopscotch. Carlson and Kelly aren't just critics of this new era, they're avatars of the backlash. Tucker channels chaos, tapping into the pent-up energy of people fed up with smug lectures in place of punchlines. Kelly brings the precision of a cultural surgeon, calmly slicing into Hollywood's bloated sense of virtue. Together intentionally or not, they're setting fire to the velvet-draped set of late-night TV. And the evidence isn't in fiery headlines, but in the quiet erosion, Kimmel's slipping ratings. Reddit threads reminiscing about when he used to be funny, think pieces asking whether comedy can survive if it forgets to actually be funny.
The description of a comedian is not so different from the job description of a journalist, as traditionally constituted. Tell the truth about the powerful. Comedians are usually a lot smarter, more clever, and incisive than journalists, but that's what they're supposed to be doing. Almost none still do. Adam Carolla is one of the very few remaining comedians in the United States. He's out with a new book called Everything Reminds Me of...
The most brutal part. This wasn't even a fight. Carlson and Kelly weren't coming for Kimmel. He just happened to embody the thing they were tearing down. And that's the trap he can't hit back without validating the criticism. If he jokes about them, he's watching. If he stays silent, the silence is deafening. Either way, the damage is done. Kimmel's brand, once rooted in mischief now, feels like a guidance counselor trying to be edgy. The crowd that used to cheer is long gone, off somewhere between Carlson's Chaos Carnival and Kelly's intellectual firing squad. Kimmel didn't lose the audience overnight. He just happened to be standing at the cultural intersection when the bulldozers came through. Carlson's viewers weren't watching late-night TV anymore, they were watching 40-minute barn rants next to taxidermied elk. Kelly's listeners didn't want sanitized monologues from Ivy League writers, they wanted someone who could call out the emperor's new clothes without choking on a spoonful of sanctimony.
They saw what we saw. They saw the frail elderly man who needed help getting off the stage. They're just too chicken shit to tell us about it because they accurately deduced that he could still be the Democratic nominee and they don't want to ding him up. Maybe you give Barbara a pass. Who gives a damn what this singer saw or says? But you know what? Jimmy Kimmel happens to be employed by ABC, which happens to have a rather large news organization. And he has been one of President Trump's most vocal critics Where are you, Jimmy? On vacation? Not good enough. You can still use your thumbs to send out a tweet. You could set the record straight right now, but
Jimmy. He kept doing his thing, smiling from a sinking ship, pretending not to notice the lifeboats paddling away. The numbers began whispering what critics wouldn't say out loud. Late night was no longer pop culture's throne room, it was a relic from a time when people sat through commercials. As Tucker and Megyn climbed the charts of digital relevance, Kimmel's grip on the comedy crown slipped like a greased bowling ball. It wasn't that he suddenly stopped being funny, it was that the room changed. The audience shifted. The landscape got louder, less forgiving. While Kimmel doubled down on moral superiority and scripted virtue, Carlson and Kelly rewrote the rules. One with chaos, the other with clarity, both left a trail of shattered illusions. Kimmel became less a comedian and more a symbol of what comedy turned into when it forgot how to laugh without a disclaimer. Carlson's offhand jabs turned late night into collateral damage. Kelly's dissection of celebrity hypocrisy left Kimmel as the ghost in the case study.
There are a lot of people who are like on your side because they're for free speech, who are not actually for free speech at all, who are pushing, a very specific foreign policy agenda, for example, and using another issue to lower your defenses and let themselves into your brain. And I think that's really sinister. Really, really, really sinister. And it's becoming more obvious now. Like if you're
through it all, Kimmel never hit back, not because he couldn't, but because, what could he even say? The critiques weren't personal, they were accurate. There was no debate, no showdown, just two former news anchors who, in their own separate ways, kicked out the stilts, holding up Kimmel's late-night throne. A man who once stood at the center of political comedy's zeitgeist now looked like someone who showed up to a party 5 years too late, holding a joke no one found funny anymore. Tucker didn't need a studio, just a barn and a mic. Megyn didn't need a network, just a podcast and a scalpel. And Kimmel stayed on his stage, adjusting the lights, wondering why the applause had thinned. While he tried to keep the torch lit, the fire had already moved on to voices that didn't care about approval from coastal elites or polite chuckles from curated audiences. They didn't want comedy with a moral compass. They wanted truth, or at least someone who wasn't pretending. And so, in the most ironic way possible, Jimmy Kimmel wasn't taken down with confrontation or cancel culture. He was taken down by relevance. He didn't lose a battle. He never even stepped into the ring. He was simply left standing under a spotlight that blinked off. The crowd moved on. The laughter died. And somewhere in the shadows of the internet, Carlson smirked, Kelly shrugged, and Kimmel adjusted his tie for a crowd that had already left the building. No mic drop. No finale. Just the echo of a takedown that no one meant to win but absolutely did.